Good morning, Cypress Bible Church. I'm Kevin Parker, one of the elders at the church, and today we are going to spend a few minutes talking about leadership, the kind of leadership that we as Christ followers should show, and we are going to use as our example the ancient and resplendent King Solomon from the Old Testament. Our passage comes from 1 Kings 3, 7 through 9, and this is Solomon talking to God. He says, "And now, O Lord my God, you have made your servant king in place of David my father. Although I am but a little child, I do not know how to go out or come in. And your servant is in the midst of your people whom you have chosen, a great people, too many to be numbered or counted for multitude. Give your servant, therefore, an understanding mind to govern your people, that I may discern between good and evil, for who is able to govern this great people?" Here we see two important elements of leadership, which are in actuality reverse sides of the same coin. The first is dependence on God. In verse 7, God says he knows that God put him where he is. He knows that all of his kingly power comes from God and that his kingdom is utterly and completely dependent on God. Solomon, as a leader, is depending on God, and he's admitting to that. The second aspect of leadership we see here is humility. How many times do we see leaders today say, "I do not know how to go out or come in"? How many times do we see them question their ability to govern the people under their charge? But Solomon says that, and in doing so, he humbles himself before God. And in his humility, Solomon asks God for wisdom, or as he says, an understanding mind to govern your people. And God gives him that. We see the example of God's wisdom in Solomon in the next passage there in 1 Kings chapter 3. And it's the account we've all heard about the two mothers who appear before Solomon disputing over a baby. The two mothers each had sons, and one of the sons died. One morning, one of the mothers woke to find a dead child in her arms, and she accuses the other mother of stealing her live son and substituting the dead one. Well, Solomon hears the case and then offers to cut the child in half and to give one half to each of these women. He does this because in his wisdom, he knows that this idea or proposal of his will cause the real mother to reveal herself and offer to give up the child to save its life. And that's what happens. And Solomon gives the child to his true mother. Now, in this account, we see yet a third element of leadership from Solomon, and that is empathy. Empathy. The ability to put yourself in another person's situation and to view it from their perspective. Not just for the purpose of criticizing and refuting that perspective, but also to understand its merits. And so that you and that other person can have a dialogue. And so that you as a leader can show that person you understand what they're going through. And so that you can make a better decision. And that's what Solomon did here. He knew that one of these women was the real mother who did not want to have her child taken away, but who would do anything to save the child's life. He took action to find out who the true mother was by putting himself in her shoes, and he gave her the child. So from Solomon, Israel's greatest king, we see four aspects of leaders: dependence on God, humility, wisdom from God, and empathy. But what about us? I am almost absolutely sure that no one viewing this video is a king. But some of us are leaders and are in positions where we would do well to deal with the people we lead with humility, wisdom, and empathy. But some of us aren't even in positions of leadership. We're employees, or we're family members, or kids, and we follow leaders because we have to or we want to. How do these leadership principles we've discussed today apply to Christians who do not occupy leadership positions? They apply because as Christians living in a sinful world, we are leaders, even if we aren't officially in leadership. 2 Corinthians 5:20 says that we are ambassadors for Christ and that God uses us to make his appeal. Philippians 2:4 says we should shine like stars in the crooked and perverse generation we live in. Paul is saying to us that as believers, our lives should stand out so that others can follow. And Jesus says the same thing in Matthew 5 when he tells his disciples they are the light of the world and to let their lights shine. So followers of Christ are leaders, even if we do not hold leadership positions. We are ambassadors for Christ. We're lights to the world. And as followers of Christ, we should do what we see Solomon doing here. Depend on God. Be humble. Show God's wisdom through empathy by putting yourself in the other person's shoes. And Christians who live this way will have the opportunity to show what God's love and leadership looks like. They will attract others and have a better chance, a better opportunity to share the good news of Jesus Christ. So be a leader in the name of Christ, even if you aren't in leadership.